So we're back, the aircraft has loaded, right? And here you can see this beauty, right? It contains this livery, right? So the HGHC003. As you can see, the aircraft has, I would say, 4 engines, right? So 2 on both ends. And if we look at the modeling, it's, I would say, pretty impressive, right? So if we focus on this part of the wing, you can see that it's really detailed, right? If we go a little bit closer and then move the camera angle, you will see that it contains all kind of dots, right? So all those details have been added, including, I would say, the dots which are available in the paint of the letters. Then if we look at this part, which is might be a little bit hard to see, so let's go a little bit closer to that one. You can also see that on the flaps themselves, right? And on the ailerons themselves, you can see the usage. And even you can see some green stuff here, right? Which is, I would say, coming to the, I would say, water pieces which are maybe left. So pretty cool. Now, if we go closer to the, I would say, main part of the aircraft, you will see that it contains also windows. And if we would look into those windows, you would even be able to look inside the aircraft, right? So if we go here, you can see the passenger seats over here. And here you can see the passenger seats, right? So, but also if you look here, this is the level of detail which you get, right? So I would say pretty impressive. Also the, I would say, pop nails also here, really nicely detailed. Logo has been included, of course, but that's, say, kind of normal. And you can see also the shadow is working, I would say, pretty cool, because it has, would say, nice, nice livery, this one. Then if we continue and we go back to the engines, which we will do now with a little bit slow speed, you can also see that on this part of the wing, you can see the usage. So I'd say extremely realistic. We're going to the wing and then we're ending up at the engines. So let's turn around in that case, slowly turning around, of course. Enjoying the nice scenery, we can see the nose wheel, right, including several sensors. And then we're back at the propeller itself and the engine. So for the engine, it's the same thing, right? You can see the usage over here. So it does look, okay, hey, this engine is used, so it makes it more realistic. And then if we focus on the propeller itself, you can see that, I would say, you can see almost that they, I would say, didn't, choose, I would say, a static color, but they really try to make it as realistic as possible. Also the, I would say, what is it? The screw on the top, pretty impressive. If we then look into the engine mode, right, or into the engine itself, you can see that they also spent I would say a serious amount of time on modeling this one, because it contains all kind of usage, and I would say that makes it even look cooler than you would normally expect. Then if we look at the bottom of the aircraft, so let's go down a bit and look at the bottom over here, you can also see that the usage has been added here, right? So usage has been added here, maybe a little bit too dotty, but it looks cool. Going to the gear itself, the gear also impressive, right? All the pneumatic systems are there. And if we come close, you can see all those pipes. You can see the usage on those pipes. Even on the wheel, you can see the usage. So that looks pretty cool, if you ask me too. Even I would say the brand of the wheel was there, right? As you could see it. Here you go. So Goodyear, and also here you can see the usage. Pretty close. Now, if we would go to the inside, you would see some other stuff. So let's go to the inside. So we're at the tail of the aircraft, and here you see some things which are, I would say, there might be some room for improvement, but maybe that's the way they develop this. So first of all, you can see, I would say realistic things, right? The usage, you can see the doors with all the signs and all the buttons. But as you can see, we're also in the middle of something. Which is, I would say, kind of looks a little bit weird, but maybe it's expected. I'm not sure about this. It looks like that there's a separate door which you need to enter before you... that's the restroom. That clarifies a lot why it looks, I would say, not completely right. but that one isn't modeled. But you can see the chairs are modeled, right? And you can see here the, I would say, the fresh air buttons. You can see some other buttons over here which allow people to control the say systems. Then this one is really cool, right? On the inside of the aircraft, there's the, I would say, world map projected. As you can see, the North Atlantic, and you can see Europe over here, UK, and then the US. You can see also the curtains which they have added. And this, I would say, is a little bit old style, right? So passengers can sit, I would say, you've got 3 chairs over here and 3 chairs over here. That also looks cool. Also the wood which they used in the cockpit, or in the, yeah, not in the cockpit, of course, in the cabin, looks pretty nice, right? So not, I would say, one single color, but it looks pretty realistic. So continuing to the front, of course, and let's go a little bit higher in that case. We will continue to see nice stuff, right? Until we hit this door, and this door, where will bring us to? Well, let's have a look. It brings us to the cockpit. And the cockpit, as you can see, contains a lot of systems, right? You can see the pilot and co-pilot already there. There are some, I would say, some glitches where, for example, here you can watch at the engine, which I would say wouldn't be expected. Here's the seat for the engineer, right? And over here we can see some navigation systems. If we look at the navigation systems themselves, right? If we move around here slowly, you can see that contains the Morse device on the right hand. And then the tuning, the bandwidth, steering, and the volumes are over here, right? If you look at this, I would say it looks pretty cool. Then if we move to the other end, we can see the throttles of the engines, of course, to control the 4 individual engines. And if we move further away, we will see a lot of gouges, right? So those gouges are hidden behind this chair. So let's go a little bit higher. And here we can see the gouges, including, I would say, several systems on the back, right? So these systems on the back are for the fuel feed, as well as for the other stuff. But I'd say some of them have been modeled, but not all of them. So be aware of that. Then if we look at this, let's say, nice panel, we can see the blowers, which you can, let's say, enable the cabin differential duct select. We can see the oil temperatures of the engines, the fuel pressure, also the fuel quantity, of course, and then the selectors for the individual engines, right? Engine number 4, fuel selector up to engine number 1. On the top, we can see the battery and also the landing lights. You can see that some of them are inoperative, right? Which simply means that you can't use it. But maybe that will be fixed in a future version, or maybe they've decided to let it as is, because in some case they don't have the permission from the let's say aircraft owner to add that. If we look at the center of the aircraft, we can see a lot of other cool things, right? In the center we can see, of course, the parking brakes, but also the pitches, but also the individual pitch trim on the left and right side, as well as the throttle, the mixers, and the propellers. And you can see that that's pretty cool, right? So here are the throttles, but here are also the throttles. So it looks like that based on this, but that's, I would say, just a guess, because I'm not 100% sure about that. That I would say both the pilot and co-pilot can control the engines using individual throttles. Because here you can see the throttles, which are in a different position compared to here. Here we've got the carburetor heat, the propellers, the tail wheel lock, right, to lock the tail wheel, and the mixtures, as well as several other buttons. These buttons haven't been, I would say, are not working based on the first look. Then if we, well, let's look at the front, right? In the front we can see the pressure, the RPMs, we can see the compass, both left and right, including some knobs over here. Those knobs, I would say, cannot be used, as you can see, right? Oh, a little bit too far. If we're far away, but if you come closer, you can see that we can change the heading selector, of course. But these other things, I don't think that these are knobs where you can use to, but maybe they are used to, I'd say, remove the instrument. And then we've got the gyro drift, and I would say the almost the let's say the virtual horizon. We can change the sensitivity over here for the gyro drift, the gyro pilot power, and the attitude gauge. So those I would say, I need to look at it because I didn't fly yet with this aircraft, but looks like that these are, say, kind of the gyro pilot, right, which is kind of a minimalized autopilot function. Then over here we can see the fuel pressure as well as the oil pressure, and then below we can see the carburetor heat, the oil temperatures, and several other nice things which you likely need to have a look at when you're flying this aircraft. Then changing the angle again, right, because we need to hide the yoke, or not the yoke. Well, let's see if we can hide it, right? That's question number one. In some cases you can, but in some other cases you can't. So it looks like that in this case we can't remove it, but maybe it's because we're in the drone mode. So in that case we're gonna go a little bit closer to the cockpit, right, or to the dashboard. So we can see the radio altitude as well as the normal altitude, as well as the airspeed and the turn angle over here, as well as the I would say direction in which we're flying. Here also the let's say the vertical horizon, right? Climb descent rates over here, and that's all you will get. On the bottom, of course, don't forget it, it's the I would say the brakes. Parking brake itself is in the center display of this aircraft. So if we look at the I would say details on the cockpit, right, you can see usage over here. Based on a quick look, you cannot hide the steering wheel, right? But maybe that's, let's say, because I'm in this drone mode, so maybe it will be possible if I go into normal mode, but that's something I would need to figure out myself later on. And that's it, right? So pretty impressive aircraft, right? So space for co-pilot is there, and then of course the passengers which are there. If you look at the detail, I'd say it's pretty cool. If we slowly move to the top, we can even see that we have some, let's say, instruments over here, right, for the cooled air, but also here some options to open the windows. And let's see if there's more on the top. Yes, there's a nice window. Question, of course, if you can open it, but likely it's not animated. And over here we've got the ADF tuning, right, which is over here, so you can also tune the ADF. So nice aircraft, I would say. I'm pretty impressed by the level of detail which they included. So let's see how it flies, right? So let's see how the engine sounds. So let me pause the recording, and then I will return to the normal mode and will show you how it looks like when it flies. But before that, I just forgot one big view, right? Which is the one on the top. So on the top you can see the individual, I'd say, engine starting modes, right? If I look at it, you can see the transponder code, you can see the review options, the services options, you can see the pilot wipers and the co-pilot. Here are the landing gear buttons, several buttons to control the different lights over here, as well as the radio station light knob, right, to control the light for the person, I would say, managing the radio, propeller DIs, and here are the engine starters and boosters and primers, as well as the magnetos. Then over here we see the ADF bearing, as well as the GPS and the V-lock, right, for navigation purposes. And over here we see the avionics master and the radio switch. So now I think we targeted everything, right, which is in the cockpit, so that's really cool. So let's get started, and let me start the aircraft and then show you how it sounds like and how you can fly with it. So we're in the normal mode, right? We're on the seat of the pilot. So let's start the aircraft, and you can do that by using the, I would say, checklist, which is included. It's a pretty extensive one. You can see that it contains the I would say a lot of the steps. So let's go to them, right? So the parking brake, as already discussed, you can find it over here, right? So make sure it's set to on. Then the service switch, which you can find on the top, it needs to be set to on. The question is in this case what's on, but likely it's like this. Then the fuel truck switch, you can also set it to on, right, which makes sure that you're connected to the fuel truck. So likely if you would move outside the aircraft, and let's do that, you will see that this will be connected to the fuel truck, but maybe it's just waiting now. No, it's there, right? So you can see over here the, I would say, the the airplane is being refueled. And you can see a nice stewardess or flight attendee over here, which is welcoming the passengers. So that's really cool, right? So if you enable those options, you will get this. So let's go inside the aircraft again, right? And let's make sure that we're continuing the checklist. We're gonna make sure that we're checking the items. Then go to the ground power, which you will find on the back. So on the back right, that's where the engineer normally sits. You can switch them to ground power, which will make sure that the aircraft gets its electricity. And then we're of course gonna check the fuel quantities. And the fuel quantities, you can see them over here, right? So make sure that you've got enough fuel in your, I would say, in your different tanks before you start flying, of course. Then, if we look at the gears down, that's on the top. So on the top, on the right side from the pilot, right, we can see all the lights are burning, which means that the gears are down, which is cool. And then we're going to switch on the navigation lights. So the navigation lights, as I already mentioned, can be found on the right side of the, so that's where the co-pilot normally is, right? So let's illuminate where to make it easier for ourselves. And this is where you can enable the navigation light. You can check the beacon light, which is over here. And then of course the landing light needs to be switched off, which is the case. You'll find them here. And the flap switch is also set to off. That's cool. Then we're going to go, let me check off these more items. We're going to go to the propeller controls. So you will find 4 of them over here, and you will need to push the maximum forward, right, to make sure that the max RPMs are being hit. In some cases, you might hit some challenges, as I currently do, right? Because you think, hey, they're not in the maximum position yet. Well, by default, they are in the maximum position, so you don't need to do anything, right? You can set them to lower, but by default, they're set to maximum, which is good. And then you can go to the fuel tank levelers. They need to be set to mains, which I do think is this position. So I do think that they're already in the correct position, but it's kind of hard to see. And that's where when I figured out while trying this the first time that you need to turn them in this position. That's what means mains. So in this case, they're in a good position, so we can check off the item. Then we're going back to the mixture settings, and the mixture settings can be found over here. They're currently set to full, which is good. So they're by default, they're in the correct position. And then we can switch on the pitot heat. Let me see. Oh, here it is. Trims, right? Trims are left and right. They need to be set to neutral, which is the case. So that's cool. And then the altimeter, which can be set by turning this knob or by pressing the letter B from Bravo. It will set the altimeter correctly. And then we need to make sure that the autopilot is switched off. The autopilot, let's say it's a little bit hard to find, but here's the autopilot, right? So the autopilot is a modernized system where you can set the heading mode, navigation mode, approach mode, back course mode, as well as the altitude hold mode. But that will be discussed in a future video where we will look specifically at the autopilot. Then going to the inverters, they need to be set to on, which I do think is auto, but that's a guess. And then we're ready, right? So then we're ready with the pre-start. So let's see how the engines can be started. So we start with the first engine number 1. We need to make sure that the boost pump is on, which is up. Then the primer needs to be set to on. It's also up. And then the starter on, and then we need to wait 5 seconds. So if we do that, do we see something happening? Well, we do see some changes, right? But not a lot, which is, I think, expected because we didn't do anything. Then after waiting 5 seconds, you need to go back to the magnetos. And that's where I would say, as you just saw, right, it doesn't do anything if you select it. But the magnetos can be found over here. So in this case, this one is for engine 1, 2, 3, and 4. So we need to set them to both, which means you need to set it to the letter B from Bravo. So that's done. Then you will see, if you look at the oil pressure, you will see the oil pressure increasing. And you already hear the sound, right? So one of the engines is, I would say, starting as it looks like. But to validate that, what's a better way of going outside and really make sure that the engine is running? So we're gonna go slowly downwards. Gonna increase the altitude. And here you can see engine number 1 is running. I would say, why shouldn't we first remove the fuel? Because I don't think it's normal that you need to, let's say, that you're starting an engine while the fuel is still being injected in the aircraft. But hey, that's it. So if we look at the engine itself, right, it looks pretty nice. And it also sounds pretty nice, right? So I will shut up for now and then you can listen. So enough. Let's go inside again and then let's make sure that the primer is switched off, right? So we're gonna switch off the primer and then you're done, right? So this is simply a process which you need to repeat for each single engine. So I will go quickly to engine number 2. So engine number 2 can be found on the other side of the other side. Where is engine number 2? Let me find it. I thought it was on the... Oh, that's a little bit weird, right? It says engine number 1. And then, so it looks like engine number 1 and engine number 2. Okay. Here it is. It's a little bit hard to see. But engine number 2. So engine number 1 is on the top, engine number 2 is on the bottom. So you need to change it like this. You need to set the primer to on, which means you need to set it to the bottom. Then you need to set it to the engine starter also to the bottom. Then wait 5 seconds, of course. And then you can turn on this one also to both. And then make sure that you're looking at the second engine. You can see that they combined engine number 1 and 2 in one gouge, right? So there are 2 arrows. One contains number 1, the other one contains number 2, and then you will see it starting increasing. Also, what you will see is that the lights are, I would say, burning, right? So if they're, I'd say, in the if you turn on the starter, it will start to increase. And that's based on this, right? You can see the oil pressure over here and the fuel pressure over here. So that looks good to me. So we're gonna switch off the primer, which it already did by default, as well as the engines. So that's good. And I would say then you can continue with engine number 3, right? So engine number 3, boost is on, primer is on, starter is on, then wait 5 seconds. And then turn this one to both. And you will see engine number 3 is also starting. Then you will see the light going off, so which means that the fuel pressure is in, let's say, in good shape. And then we can of course continue with engine number 4. Boost is on, primer is on, starter is on. Wait 5 seconds. And then move it to both, which will also ensure that the last arrow will, let's say, continue, and you can see that the fuel drop is dropping, right? The fuel pressure is dropping. So that, I would say, wasn't that hard, right? So keep in mind that the boost off and the primer off is not strictly required, because it will put these, I would say, systems by default in the neutral position, as you can see. So that's good. So then I would say the warm-up phase, right? So what do we need to do? So we need to, let's say, get rid of the fuel truck, as well as the services, as well as we need to enable and change to the battery, right? Because we're still connected to ground power. We need to change this one, which is over here, to battery. And then we need to check the instruments. I think everything is okay, except maybe the fuel pressure is a little bit low, but I do think that that's could be expected. So that's why it also says, hey, check the instruments, and check the instruments. Okay, hey, we need to check that the instruments are working as expected, and also make sure that they would say the gouges over here are, I would say, as expected. Then we can increase the throttle, and that will always be fun. So if you're having a joystick, then make sure that you're in the correct profile, right? So let me show you. So if you press escape, you can go to the control options, and inside this you will have different profiles. In my case, for the velocity 1, I've got, I would say, twin engine jet, and I've got a different profile. And because this engine or this aircraft has 4 engines, make sure that the throttle has been set up correctly. So if you go here and then search for throttle, you will see you've got, I would say, a generic throttle, but you also have the individual engine throttles. If you're lucky, you've got, let's say, 4 handlers, then you can control those engines individually. But if you don't have it, then I would recommend you to set up the throttle axis, which allows you to control the engines using, I would say, one single button, which makes it easier. Once you've done that, right, don't forget to save the preferences, and then make sure that that control is active. And then you can simply start increasing the power, right? So let's do that. It says increase to 1500 RPM, right? So here we can see the RPM values. You can see it for number 2 and 3, but believe me, there's also a 1 and 2 behind it. But likely they're hidden now because they're all, let's say, started at the, or all increased at the same time using one single leveler on a joystick. So this 1500, right? Then the Mac check. And the Mac check, what it means is that you need to change it to 1 back. So like this. And then you need to make sure that the RPM drops 100% or 100 RPM. And that's also where you see arrow number 1 coming in, right? So now it's dropped 100. So that's cool. And then you can turn it back to, of course, to, I'd say, to RB. And you can, or officially you need to repeat this for every engine, but for the purpose of this video I'm not going to do it. When you start to both again, you will see that it will start to increase again, so it's good. Then the doors closed check, right? The doors closed, and that means that the service is off, because if you switch off the service, it will also automatically close the door. And then of course the radios are set. So the radios can be set here. It's a little bit hard to see, right, on which frequency they are, but using these options you can change the frequency of the radio. But I do think that they might have missed a step, because I'm not sure why this hasn't been eliminated. It could be due to the fact that the master switch is not being switched on, right, the avionics master. So let's switch that one on. Yeah. So that's the step they missed, right? So if you're looking to fine tune or to tune the radios, you'll likely are unable to do it because the master switch is not in here. I'm not sure if they added it somewhere else, or if I did miss that step, which is, I would say, entirely possible. No, it looks like that they missed that step in the manual. So don't forget to switch on that one, because else it might not work. So you can fine tune the navigation radios and the communication radios up to you what you need. Then we've got the tail lock. So if you look at the tail lock, right, which is over here, you can, I'd say, switch it off, because that makes sure that you can move the tail wheel, and you can set the flaps, right? So if you can set the flaps using the option over here as required, right? If you look at the top, you will see that they will move into the correct position. So moving it back to neutral, and moving it to, for example, this value, you can see that they're slowly moving, and if you would look outside of the aircraft, you would also be able to see it. So that's cool. Here's a button where it says, okay, flaps up and down, landing flaps down. Not sure what it relates to, but that's also what you can do if you want. Then it's time to, okay, the trims are set to neutral, we already checked it, and then you need to set the parking brake off, of course, before you can, I would say, start taxiing, right? So let's see how that works, right? So I'm gonna remove the parking brake, so let's first go outside. We can see all the engines are running. So likely we need to be pushed back, because if we don't do that, we are, I would say, damaging everything, and likely it will also damage the aircraft itself. So what I will do now, I will pause recording, then we'll put the aircraft on the runway, and then we'll take off. So on the runway with this aircraft, so taxiing can be pretty challenging, I can already tell you. So the other thing which is hard is control the aircraft, right, while on a slower speed, so keep that in mind. You will see that also during takeoff, it will be pretty challenging to keep it, I would say, in the straight line. Well, there's a message that the internet connectivity has been lost, always nice, but let's ignore it for now. So let's, we're connected again, which is good. And for those who have got those messages right, be aware that Asobo is looking into this. So let's say remove the parking brakes in this case, and let's start increasing the throttle. So keep in mind that increasing the throttle is, I would say, kind of slow, right? So if you push it forward, it will take a few seconds after the aircraft has started to adopt it. And here we go. So let me go inside the cockpit for now, because it makes it easier to control the aircraft and keep it in the center of the runway. You can see the speed increasing, right? You can see it over here, right? Ooh, where's the mouse? Here. So let's push back the stick a bit. Then we're gonna pull up the gears, and you will see that those lights will turn red initially. And then once the gears are up, it will, I would say, make sure that this one is in the landing gear controls are locked. That's a good thing. In addition to that, you can lock the tail wheel, right? You can do it like that, and that will also make sure that that light is being illuminated. So always easy to check, hey, are my gears up and is everything fine? So that's good. Then we're pushing the flaps to 0. And then we're flying, right? So from the outside, it also looks pretty cool. This is of course not the drone view, but the, I would say, normal view where you can also see the engines. So because I want to have an eye on the AOA, right? And here you can see the aircraft, right? So pretty well, pretty cool. There, I'd say it's trending always left or right for some reason. So keep it in mind that you always need to, let's say, control the aircraft. Because if you leave it untouched, then it will tend to move to the left, as you can see. Also make sure, of course, that you're not exceeding that climb rate, right? So maybe it's better to push it a little bit down in this case, because else it will, let's say, climb too fast. Which, of course, can also be seen inside the cockpit also by also looking at this view. So here ends this video where we looked at this nice aircraft. It's a really nice one, and I would say already love flying with this one. It gives a little bit the feeling of the DC-3, only with more engine power. So if we go again in the cockpit, you can see that everything is working. All the gouges are, or most of the gouges are working as expected, which is really cool. For the autopilot piece, I'll keep an eye on my channel, because I will record a separate video for that one, because that's, I would say, a little bit specific with this aircraft, but I would say still very useful in some scenarios. Hope you liked this video. If you liked it, then consider to use the like button. If you got questions or comments, then feel free to post them in the comment box below. And if you want to stay up to date about new videos I'm posting, then make sure that you're subscribing to my channel. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.